Today on In Your Face Anatomy, we are looking at the endocrine system. I started with the overview here, so let's jump right into it. All right, the endocrine system. So the endocrine system, when we talk about the endocrine system, what we're really talking about are your glands, your internal glands, but specifically the hormones that these glands secrete. So when we talk about your endocrine system, we are talking about your hormones and your glands. And that's the biggest part of the entire endocrine system, is being able to make that distinction, hormones and glands. So before we get into it too far, what we want to make the distinction of is what is the difference between my endocrine glands and my exocrine glands. So we did exocrine glands when we did chapter 5 of Anatomy 1. Remember, exocrine glands are things that secrete their products externally. That's why we call them exocrine glands, externally. They secrete it externally to the outside of the body. So this is for stuff like your sweat glands that are going to leak out of your pores. So like sweat glands, those are exocrine glands, or milk glands, or earwax glands. Your scent glands, these are all exocrine glands because they're excreting outside. Endocrine actually means internal secretion, meaning that we're secreting their products into the body, but specifically into the bloodstream is where it's going to end up. So we're going to secrete these hormones. They're going to end up in our bloodstream, and then our bloodstream is going to carry these hormones to the rest of the body, to all of the other tissues that need these hormones. So they secrete, it means internal secretion. They secrete internally, but specifically into the blood. That's really one of the keys, into the blood for my endocrine gland. So that's the difference between endocrine and exocrine. Now, how do hormones actually work? Well, hormones they fit into their target cells. That's what they're looking for. When they get secreted, they get released into the bloodstream. They start traveling through the bloodstream looking for the target cell. And when they find that target cell, they have the receptor that has to fit into it. It has to fit exactly like a lock and a key. Get in there and then open it up and start actually expressing that hormone and being able to get some of the influences that we want from that hormone onto our body. So hormones work by acting on target cells, and that's really the big key here, are target cells. They're not just wandering randomly throughout our body. They are looking for these specific cells. And our body can do a couple of things to help encourage hormones finding these target cells. And we can control these hormones through the process of upregulation or downregulation. So upregulation just means we are going to increase the number of receptors on a specific target cell. We're going to increase the number of receptors on this target cell, and that's going to make it much more likely that the hormone is going to find this target cell and be able to elicit the response. We are increasing the number of target receptors on a target cell, making it that much more likely to be found. Or we can downregulate. Maybe we're trying to weed out this hormone or some of these hormonal effects. We can downregulate our target cells and decrease the number of target cells, or number of receptors on a target cell. So that's the difference between upregulation and downregulation. Either we can increase the number of receptors, making it much more likely that the hormone will find that target cell, or we can decrease the number of receptors with downregulation and make it less likely that the hormone is going to find that target cell and be able to elicit the response. Now we split our hormones into two broad kind of categories here. I've got steroid hormones, and remember, steroids are lipids. Steroids are lipids. And these are for things like our sex hormones or the hormones from our adrenal cortex specifically. Excuse me. Sex hormones, adrenal cortex hormones. Or we can divide them in the other category, which is protein hormones. And this is the ones that we're more familiar with. We've been looking at proteins for a long time. They're making an appearance here in hormones as well. This is most of our hormones are actually protein hormones. Just my sex hormones and the hormones of my adrenal cortex specifically are going to be classified under steroid hormones. So those are the main two categories of hormones we find in the body. Steroid, which are lipids, and protein hormones. Don't get confused and think steroids are proteins. That is not the case. So now that we have a layout between endocrine system and our exocrine system, and we're understanding the different types of hormones that we get and how these hormones actually work, we can look into some of the cause and effect issues that come along with these hormones. So one of these is half-life. Now the first thing I really want to lean on you here with half-life. Half-life measures removal. Half-life measures removal, which just tells us that it takes us, how long does it take to get this hormone back out of our blood? We have our endocrine glands, they're secreting the hormones, dumping it directly into the bloodstream. How long does it take to get it back out of the blood? That's where half-life comes in. So half-life is actually defined as the time it takes to remove half the hormone from the blood plasma. How long does it take to remove half the hormone from the blood plasma? That's what half-life is technically. We want to just note that it measures removal. We're getting rid of the hormone now. So if I was to ask a question, what is the half-life of a hormone that is at 25% after 2 days? What is the half-life of a hormone that's at 25% after 2 days? So the way half-life works is, what we have to remember is that we always start out at 100%. We always start out at 100%, meaning when this hormone when this gland has released its hormone, we've released all the hormone we're releasing right now. That is 100% of the hormone that we are releasing. Boom. So we always start out at 100%. And then we start counting down. So we know we got to get down to 25%. So we go from 100 to 50. So that's 1. And then 50 to 25. To get me down to 25%, it took 2 divisions. I had to go through 2 concurrent cycles of half-life to get there. I had to go the first division to go from 100 to 50, and then the second division to go from 50 to 25. So I have 2, and I have a half-life of 2 days or 48 hours. So I have to divide that by 2 because I only went through 2 divisions. So that's going to give me a half-life of 1 day, because 2 divided by 2 divisions by the 2 days is going to be 1 day. All right, the hypothalamus. The last thing on the introduction to our endocrine system is the hypothalamus. It connects your brain to your endocrine system. So that's a big thing that we want to know about the hypothalamus. That's huge. It's the connecting piece between my brain and my endocrine system. We also want to note that my hypothalamus secrete tropic hormones. So you'll see this term a lot. You may see it as tropic. You may see it as tropin. Either way. And it's always a suffix in the word. So we'll say like gonadotropin or corticotropin, something along those lines that add the tropic component to it. So a tropic hormone is a hormone that when it gets released, it causes other hormones to be released. That's what a tropic hormone is. It's a hormone that causes other hormones to be released, and we get several tropic hormones out of our hypothalamus. Now, I don't really classify the hypothalamus as part of the endocrine system because it's part of the nervous system, but it is that bridge between the nervous system and my brain with the endocrine system itself. One of the big things our hypothalamus does for us are the 4 F's. We're going to use this and its hormones and all of its effects here for fighting or fleeing. So if we've got to fight for our life or run for our life, we've got our hypothalamus involved. For feeding, when it comes time for feeding, hypothalamus, or for fornication. Those are the 4 F's. Fighting, fleeing, feeding, and fornication. So that's a quick, basic introduction, startup for the endocrine system, kind of covering all of those bases. I really want to fix this real quick here too. Let's try this again and say if we're at 12.5% after 6 hours, I think is going to be a little bit easier for us. So we're coming back to half-life real quick. What is the half-life of a hormone that is at 12.5% after 6 hours? So again, we go 100 to 50, 50 to 25, 25 to 12.5, that's 3. 3 divided by 6 now is going to be 2 hours. So my half-life is 2 hours. So it took me 2 hours to go from 50 to 100. I'm sorry. It took 2 hours to go from 100 to 50. It took another 2 hours to go from 50 to 25. And then it took another 2 hours to go from 25 to 12.5. So those are my 3 divisions, getting me down to 12.5. That's 6 hours total. My half-life for each of those divisions is 2 hours. So that's a better, more thorough half-life example for you. So yeah, just practice that a little bit. It'll make sense. It's nothing too crazy. All right, good luck.